Welcome back, everybody. This is part three of our continuing series of our OP podcasts and backpacking. If you missed it, we talked about the 7 principles of leave no trace involved with backpacking, and we've done planning ahead, travel on camp on durable surfaces, and dispose of waste properly. And today we'll be talking about the last 4 principles of leave no trace. Just introducing our panelists today, and who all is going to be helping out discussing some of the leave no trace principles is Dave Lamont, Brian Ferguson, and Liza Krell. My name is Jordan, and we'll go ahead and get started. So, Liza, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, right. Thank you, Jordan, for the introduction. So as Jordan said, we had talked about the first 3 principles in previous podcasts, and today we're just kind of wrap it up with the last 4 principles. So number 4 is leave what you find. Number 5 is minimize campfire impacts. Number 6 is respect wildlife. And number 7 is be considerate of other visitors, right? So I think, logically just starting at 4, because that's the next one in the list we haven't covered yet. But leaving what you find, right, that's super important for lots of reasons. But, a lot of it is just, okay, you might think I'm going to, oh no, I might gonna have a cat interrupt me. I might, okay, I'll take a little flower or a little rock and nobody will notice. I'll take it as a souvenir, which you'd think, okay, yeah, if only one person ever did that, wouldn't be a big deal and nobody would notice. But like, everybody thinks, okay, I'm just going to take one. And then next thing you know, there's no more flowers and no more rocks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another part of this is like historical artifacts, cultural artifacts, right? You find like an arrowhead, right, out in one of our deserts, something like that, right? Everybody's like, oh, that's really cool. I want to take it, right? But then you just think about the experience you just had finding and seeing that, and now you've robbed that from somebody else, right?
Expected.
Yeah, totally. And then I just wanted to add too, I went to Hawaii a few years ago, and it's like really, really bad to take stuff home from the island, like a rock from the beach. It's like really bad luck, and you're not supposed to have it leave the island. So, just speaking more to a cultural part, right? They don't want you to take that stuff off the island. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, speaking of the bad luck thing, so just kind of an off subject, but still on subject, I guess there's that whole idea of it being bad luck has kind of been, people have been becoming more aware of it. So there's a bunch of people who are actually sending rocks back to
Wow.
Hawaii. Yeah, it's like a huge problem right now. They're like, we've got so many rocks that people are just sending back. We don't know what to do with these rocks.
Wow.
So a lot of people have taken them, and obviously, I don't know, maybe they had bad luck and they were like, well, I need to get the rock back to get rid of the bad luck.
Maybe.
Yes. The little vials of sand that you see that everyone wants to bring home.
Yeah, for me it was red dirt from the island of Kauai, in the canyon of the Waimea Canyon on Kauai Island. Everybody wanted to bring home this red dirt, and they sell these red dirt shirts that are, anyway, it's like a big tourist thing.
But how do you know dirt's actually from there? Do you know that for a fact, or is it just kind of like, hey, that's always the thing that I worry about whenever I buy those souvenir shops and stuff. But anyways, Brian, you had something to say.
Do you know that another concern, like with picking wildflowers, is that plants can be in different kind of stages of migration, for example, and it's possible if they're stressed and at risk that the removal of a few of their genetic strains or seed production can put the entire strain of plant under at risk, and especially in with regardless of what you feel like the cause might be or contributor to climate change, it is occurring, and trees trees and other plants are actually migrating, moving north, and sometimes they'll hit a insurmountable ridge, what have you, and not be able to continue their migration. An example of that is with animals is the pika, and they just keep moving higher and higher, but eventually, they just can't keep going higher. in order to kind of find their ideal habitat.
Well, and Brian, I'm glad you brought that up because that is part of Leave What You Find, is thinking about the health of the wildlife and the plant population, right? And even if you're not taking something, if you're doing something like carving your initials into a tree, like putting those little injuries into a plant, into a tree, if it's already stressed out, that can be kind of the last straw, and that can kill the tree or the plant or whatever. And then, that's the other thing is animals live off of the stuff that's out there. They live off of the nectar from the flowers, and they make houses with the tree branches, and they live in the trees. So like, not only are you like ruining somebody else's experience, but you're also like, kind of messing this animal's home up. Like you're making it harder for them to survive.
So I've got a quick question with that. How does let's just say like there's a dead tree or something like that has fallen on the path, or something like that, or maybe you're at a camp on a campground or something, and you see a big rock that you want to kind of move over to your fire and sit on. How does that kind of, I guess, impact? Is that part of just kind of like Leave What You Find, or like, hey, there's a log in the middle of this trailhead right here, I just kind of want to move it out of the way? Does that like affect any kind of ecosystem that's growing around it? Is that kind of okay? Like, where does that kind of play in?
So I would say with like the idea, they always say that a good campsite is found, not made. So you kind of want to just like, just find the good campsite, leave stuff alone, and maybe it's a small thing, but you're going to move the rock and you're going to expose these bugs that are living under there. And then, so it just kind of like, it disrupts the natural flow. With the idea of a log being in the actual trail, because I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of times people will put logs across like, social trails that they're not actual trails. So they're trying to discourage people from going down them and continuing the wear. But I don't know. What do you guys think about the whole idea of the log in the trail? I'm not sure what to say on that one.
Brian, go ahead.
I think those are mostly maintained trails. And so I think that to wait for the trail maintenance crews to make decisions around that stuff, like the example behind you of the fallen logs, we certainly encounter those sometimes. I think that if they're easily moved and that's kind of a safety issue for others and what have you, that's probably not particularly harmful. But
yeah, I was just going to bring up that safety part. If I'm middle of a backpacking trip and there's a downed tree across a trail, last thing I want to do is injure myself trying to move that. Right now, I got way bigger problems. So I think that's a small part of it for sure. I was just going to say context probably drives my decision in that realm, Jordan. Really popular trail. We had a big storm last night. Yeah, maybe this tree fell over and just kind of push it to the side. But backcountry setting, I might feel really different about that.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's actually funny that you mentioned, if you get injured on a trail trying to actually move it, you have bigger problems. I actually tried to do that one time. I was on a trail and there was a huge log with like a stick poking up. So it was just kind of like while you're walking, the stick was like eye level. So I tried to break it off and it was still kind of fresh. And so it had some flexibility and durability to it. And I bent it and then it kind of just whipped it back and it like cut my entire hand. It was like a small little like notch in the stick that I was trying to break off, and it completely cut my hand open. So I was bleeding the entire time on the trail, and I didn't even get to break it off. So that makes a lot of sense. Just trying to avoid stuff like that and letting it kind of go to more other, other people responsible for the trail.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. A lot of people wouldn't really think about something like that. That's really cool.
Hey.
I was gonna say, I don't know, Liz, if you were going on the same path as I was going, but that kind of really correlates to the next principle too, with just kind of, starting a campfire, minimizing the impact that it has, and I've got a couple things that I like to say about campfires because I'm a little passionate about it. But let's go ahead and bring us into the next one, Liza.
Yeah, no, that is exactly where I was going with that. While we're talking about logs, Yeah, so the next principle is minimizing campfire impacts, which, there's the parts of that that are kind of obvious, like don't let your campfire turn into a forest fire, because that happens, and that happens a lot in Colorado, unfortunately. Um, but there's also the smaller parts of that, like, once again, kind of disturbing the natural flow of things and having this big fire pit that's not supposed to be there in the middle of some field. And also things like collecting wood, where, maybe there isn't a lot of just kind of spare wood on the ground. Maybe you're in a place where there's not a lot of trees, and that little bit of wood you're going to take, something else needed that. It's not like in my background where there's just kind of these big old logs everywhere. Like, maybe you're somewhere where that's not available, and creating a campfire is really going to have that impact. So yeah, Jordan, I know you said you're passionate about the subject, so why
Yeah.
don't you start that one?
Yeah, I know we mentioned it in past podcasts about what you put in specifically, the fire itself, but I always like to make sure that if I'm going to, like, I know I'm going to have a campfire, I'm going to bring some extra logs that I have already purchased, so I don't have to kind of find some little dead twigs or things like that. Maybe even bigger trees and things in the forest. I also like to make sure that I'm not tearing off or breaking live trees, because that's kind of affecting the ecosystem and affecting how you guys already mentioned earlier about trees and migration and how it's living, and what other animals are utilizing that resource. And then I've also got a kind of a big, it's kind of, we can talk about it at the end with putting out the fires, but that's probably the biggest factor to me, is making sure that your fire is actually put out, because I've heard of a lot of campfires and large forest fires starting because just people weren't paying attention, or they were irresponsible with the amount of moderation and monitoring they were doing with their campfire.
Let me tell you about some of the scariest moments I've had backpacking, man.
Mhm.
Right? On the trail all day, haven't seen anybody. Nobody. All day. 10 hours of hiking, right? I get to the camp spot on our map. Fire pit still warm, or even
Yeah.
smoldering, right? It's frequent, man. It's sad. It's scary.
Ah,
It's like, how long has it been like that? A couple hours? It's been like that since yesterday? Like, oh, so scary, so scary. So you're absolutely right. Putting it out. Key. Key.
My friends pick on me for how paranoid I am on that. But we went camping one time, and we were setting up our camp, putting everything down, and I had some extra pieces of, like, cardboard that I was going to use as kindle to kind of just start the fire. And I put it in the pit. And we were all setting up our tents, getting everything out, getting our boxes and stuff ready to go. And then all of a sudden, there's a campfire. Like, the fire is going in the pit. And we were just like, did you light it? No. Did you light it? No. Nobody lit it. It was just already, like, it was just not put out. And the cardboard was so, flammable and so brittle that it caught because of the heat that was still left there. So those are things that just, like, infuriate me. So now now my friends were kind of like, yeah, I understand why you're so paranoid and why you take 30 minutes to put out and make sure that the fire is put out before you leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say absolutely. And that's kind of one of the biggest parts of the principles. And especially, and you were talking about, like, log size, that's something you should consider, because if you're making a camp that maybe you're staying at just for the night, or, you're going to stay there for the night, pack up and go back to backpacking, you need that fire to be out before you guys go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
So using, like, smaller logs, and they say to just, like, use smaller stuff, logs, I don't know, that's something that big is a log, I don't know. But, use smaller stuff so it'll burn out quicker, because you want to essentially burn it all to ash, and then make sure that before you call it a night, that the campfire area is actually cool to the touch.
Right.
Which you need to be careful with that, and be mindful of the time. But if you're if you're gonna just have a fire, go to bed, then you need to use the smaller logs. Make sure there's nothing left there. And that's also part of the leave no trace factor with the fire, is that if you have these large burnt pieces of logs still left over, that leaves a trace. Whereas if you have ash, once it's cool to the touch and it's completely out, you can scatter it, and then there's no evidence of a campfire, and it's left no trace.
Two thoughts. One from me is the size of the fire.
Yeah.
So we like a bonfire nowadays. But for example, the Utes, they maintained these fires. They were just tiny fires, just enough for what they needed. And they kept them going for a long time so that everything burned to ash. And also, though, and these are related, just the location of the fire and the surface and the use of pans.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have content on fire pans, if that's part of Leave No Trace or not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So fire pans are definitely, if you're, so I guess I should put in that not segue, but that mention that part of the Leave No Trace with fires is, asking yourself if you really, if you need to be making a fire, because a lot of times, we have these lightweight camping stoves, we have warm clothes. If you have that and you don't need to make a fire, probably just don't make the fire, right? Like, it's easier. You're not gonna, especially in Colorado, when it's like, even when it's not fire ban, this is still really flammable everywhere. So like a lot of times that's just easier. But one of the, next best options is, if you decide you absolutely have to have this fire for whatever reason, is these little metal fire pans that you can bring with you while you're backpacking. So they keep the ground from being charred. You can, you're in a little bit more control of the area, and then you can tell once it's completely out, because the whole thing will be cool and you can go scatter it. So that is the recommendation for Leave No Trace. Is to use existing fire pits or fire pans.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in some areas you're required. So like on river trips, right, rafting trips, kayaking trips, banks of the water, riparian ecosystems, incredibly fragile. And so if you're gonna have a fire, say parts of like Utah on raft trips, right, you have to have a fire pan. The ranger will actually check that you have a first aid kit and a fire pan before they issue your permit to get on the river. So just small point, right? They could differ, right? A fire ring at an improved campsite is very different than how you would build a fire in a backpacking trip in a wilderness setting versus how you build a fire on the river on the bank of a river. So it comes back to the first principle, right? Prepare, plan ahead.
Yep.
Yeah.
Know what the regulations for the fire is. Yeah. Cool.
I don't know who said it. I think it was Brian, maybe just about fire bans too, and making sure you're aware of that. I mean, that kind of goes along with, planning ahead, is making sure that, if there is a fire ban, like you can't burn, no burn at all. Like, that's a pretty hefty penalty, a pretty hefty fine if you get caught like that. So I just want to kind of highlight that as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. But that might have been Dave. But, another thought. So I worked for a while as a seasonal ranger, and one of our responsibilities was to extinguish fires whenever they might occur. And we were frequently visiting campsites where fires were left burning. And then extinguishing them is a surprising amount of water required. People quite likely thought that they had extinguished the fire adequately. And there's something that's not often understood, and there's really an argument for using a fire pan, and that is that fires can travel into buried structures that happen to be flammable. For example, wood, even a coal seam, or whatever, and they can smolder under there for quite a long time, flare back up later, and even in a coal seam situation, just kind of a rare thing, but burn for literally years and years. And there are some examples of that here in Colorado.
Let me ask you guys a quick question. What is your best way to extinguish a fire? Like, if you don't have a whole lot of resources, or you wanted to minimize the amount of like I know obviously a fire extinguisher is not something that you would bring on a camping trip, but what are some of your ways that you would actually put out a fire safely, and not bearing in mind that you're not taking a lot from the environment, you're not really breaking stuff off and putting it out in a damaging way?
I think that's where the small fires come in, right? Because the best way, that's what is recommended, is to let it burn completely to ash. So you're not necessarily putting it out. You are burning it until there's nothing left to burn. So you don't have to worry about thinking that it's put out and then it reigniting because you've got this big hot lump of log in there. So that would be my suggestion, is just, it's easier to let a small fire burn out than it is to put and burn completely to ash than it is to put out a very large fire.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a huge consideration for having one, right? Again, let's put it in a backpacking context, right? Cool.
Mhm.
This campsite tonight is not near a water source, right? So if we're planning on using water to put this fire out, I'm now taking my survival item that I need
Yeah.
to live. So maybe I don't have a fire that night. Yeah. I mean, again,
Which,
excellent question, right? Part of that planning. What's my plan for making this safe after we do it?
say, what's your thought on dirt? Like putting dirt on the fire. I know dirt is a kind of a pretty good extinguisher, but obviously you don't want to be taking dirt from a specific part of the campground or even maybe a trail or something like that and putting it on it, and then you're now kind of damaging the environment a little bit.
I think you said it there. The other consideration there too is that you can sort of create a low aerobic environment where coals can survive for a long time because they're not burning quickly. So sometimes you may just be preserving the fire, helping
Insulating.
it to last longer by cutting off the direct oxygen flow to it. So burying a fire is not a very good option. It's really having a water source that's close by that you have virtually unlimited water to completely flood if you've gotten it kind of too big or it's time to put it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And that is just, completely, I feel like maybe we might be moving towards the next topic, but I did want to make a quick mention of this. I know you talked about kind of like not necessarily using wood that's directly in the area or directly, like within your campsite. But this is very important. If you need to check regulations, and if you bring your own wood, you need to buy it locally. Like, so if you're hiking, buy it within a couple of miles.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because if you bring it from, let's say you're traveling across state lines, and it is also illegal to do this in a lot of cases, but if you're bringing your own wood to burn, you can introduce like things like those beetles that we have that are killing all the pine trees right now. You can introduce these pests. So always make sure that you buy local and check the regulations of if you're allowed to even, have kind of outside firewood.
Man, even at like KOA campgrounds, right? Just like RV camping, and pavement parking lots, like watch for those signs, right?
Yeah. Just buy, and if you're at a KOA, they sell wood there, so
Exactly.
just buy it from them.
I like that a lot. I mean, you really got to respect the environment and exactly every tiny aspect that you're involved with when you're on a campfire and you're on a trail. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the next principle of leaving no trace. It's you're respecting wildlife. And fortunately, I haven't seen too many or had too many occurrences of interactions with wildlife. But do you want to go a little in depth for us, Liza?
Yeah. So respect wildlife, and that once again, that's you're in their home when you're outside. Like, yeah, you're visiting and you're enjoying your nice hike and your vacation, but this is where they live, right? So they have to survive out here. They don't get to go, oh, I'm tired, I'm just gonna call my trip early and go home. Like, they have to live out there. So there's a lot you can do to make their lives more difficult, and there's a lot you can do to just be respectful and let them kind of be part of the natural flow and to not interrupt their lives. So some of that is things like, keeping your distance from them, even if it's something that's not it's not a creature that's going to harm you. You're still going to scare them, and they're going to get that adrenaline rush, and they're going to get their heart rate up, and they're going to expend all this energy to get away from you. Just keep your distance. Let them do their thing. If there's, animals crossing the trail, give them time to cross and then continue on your hike. One of the big things is not feeding the wildlife, right? Don't ever do that. I don't care what it is. Don't feed it. Even its little adorable fluffy chipmunk, don't feed it. Because, we've talked about this with disposing of waste properly. Once you start feeding animals, they associate people with food. And then if they come across a person who's not feeding them, they act aggressive. And the unfortunate part, but understandable, is any animal that is aggressive that causes injury to a human gets put down. That's just the policy for Colorado State Wildlife Departments. That's how they keep us safe out there, is by kind of euthanizing the animals that will injure us. But you don't want to be the person who taught an animal to be aggressive, and therefore you're responsible for them getting euthanized as well, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of what I have on that. But what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I've seen, or at least with part of this, I've heard that if you stick your arm out, like your arm out, and then you put your thumb up, if you can still see the animal like behind your thumb, you're too close.
Yeah.
So you need to back up. So obviously, the bigger the animal is, the further away you're going to have to be. If you're up close to a chipmunk and you can barely see the chipmunk, you know, with your thumb, okay, you're about the right distance. But if you can see the animal, you know, behind your thumb, you're too close.
I have heard that before, and I think that's a good, very general, but yes, a good distance measuring. Because yeah, you think, okay, a chipmunk, you know, you don't have to be that far away to avoid scaring it and for it to not have an interaction with you. However, if you're near an angry bison, if you're closer than that thumb distance and they charge, you're not getting away. Like, and they might charge you if you're closer than that thumb distance, because you're in their, you know, you're in their territory. They don't know you. You're in their house. What are you doing here? Get out of here, bud.
Yeah, I think a big part about this is somewhat with campsite selection, right? I mean, you don't want to camp right next to a body of water, lake, trail, right? A couple hundred yards away from that stuff. For the impact on the environment, but a part of that is also for the impact on wildlife, right? So like just looking at my picture in my background, if I went and camped right there, right, all day, I got there at whatever 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm gonna hang out, and maybe my fire's up here, but like we're all hanging down here for hours in the evening. That might prevent an animal from coming and accessing that water source. So just kind of thinking about that part too.
I'm just now putting a link into our chat to Coursera free course Mountains 101, which is just excellent. There's so much of what Liz is talking about is a part of the course, and just how delicate the balance is for these critters who live out there, and how robust and healthy they may seem, but how close they are to these margins of survival, not survival, and one stressful experience on top of other stressful experiences, like a lot of other people might cause. So it's not just you and the one time, but other critters and you know, a lot of these animals are hunted daily. So that additional stress that we can apply sometimes can be a matter of affecting a tipping point. Yeah. And that might be not really commonly kind of understood. So this course, Mountains 101, Coursera, I did the course. It was excellent, and highly recommend it.
Nice. Just looking at your shirt, Black Diamond shirt, Brian, like rock climbing, right? This is something that we run into often. Rock climbing is routes or areas are closed for peregrine falcon nesting. So just respecting that type of stuff too, right? Like, oh, you know, Lumpy Ridge, like really famous closures up on Lumpy Ridge near Estes Park for peregrine falcon nesting. So knowing that stuff, avoiding those areas, respecting that wildlife that way.
Well, I'm going to take that as a segue, because Dave, you are absolutely right, and there are a lot of raptor closures, especially in the springtime. You know, not just peregrine falcons, but they close for owls, they close for vultures. You know, Castlewood Canyon, about half the walls get shut down every year just for the birds to nest and rear their babies. And that's the big thing about that, is not only if you disrespect those closures, it's kind of like a hard line, and it's like, it's, you know, not only is it illegal, but it's very taboo in the climbing world to like disrespect those closures. And that's A, because you're affecting an animal's ability to survive, but B, that's a really good way for climbers to like lose access to areas,
Sure.
right? And then you're messing up not only your ability to go climb places, but they might say, hey, no, nobody gets to climb here anymore because these people didn't respect the closure. And I think that's kind of the next.
We got phones going off, dogs barking. What are we doing?
Which is a segue
Cats.
to another
Cats.
one, which is controlling your animals around other critters, too, right?
Yeah.
Keeping the dog on a leash, that kind of thing.
Totally,
I will
totally.
pass that to you, Jordan, for principle number 7.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the seventh principle is being considerate of other visitors, and that kind of encompasses a lot of different things, and especially the last few principles that we've talked about. Respecting other visitors and protecting the quality of their experiences. Being courteous and maybe stepping to the side, going downhill, and encouraging packing stock. I guess encourage or encountering pack stock, take breaks and camp away from trails and other visitors, and letting nature's sounds kind of prevail, avoiding loud voices and noises, and even like at night probably bigger lights and things like that. So there's a ton of aspects and a ton of components here, but I think a lot of people have different preferences, but I really liked kind of just some of the points that were utilized in the resource that I just mentioned is, just not being overly loud, not being, just rude. You have to preserve the quality of experience that other people are going to have, because that may be their first time out there, and acknowledging that you're not the only person experiencing this type of environment.
I got just kind of a funny anecdotal story. Backpacking Northern California on the Lost Coast, so 7-day beach backpacking trip, just hiking the beach the whole time. And it's like halfway through the trip or whatever, we're sleeping, and we get woken up by a Boy Scout troop leader, right? Like just comes into our sight, because he sees us, right? You're just hiking the beach, there's no trail, right? So you just like camp up like in the scrub, away from the water. So he like sees us up there. So he actually made a point coming over, waking us up. He's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm with the Boy Scout troop, and there's like 80 of us, and we're hiking through here today. And we just wanted to give y'all a heads up in case you wanted to get up and get in front of us, right? Or if you like wanted us to kind of hike through." But they were trying to be considerate of our experience, right? We hadn't seen anybody in 2 days, and we're about to be kind of waylaid by 80 kids, right? So he's like giving us a heads up, right? Trying to be considerate of the experience we were trying to have too, which we really appreciated. And then the troop happened to be from Littleton, Colorado, so that was even funnier.
Small world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the aspect that, of kind of letting people go through, giving people the option. I mean, everybody hikes at different speeds and different paces. Everybody has different experiences when they camp or when they, some people are like doers. They just want to go out and get the hike done. They want to get to the very top, and that's the experience. Some people take their time and they soak in the experience. And so traveling might not be, traveling can go at different paces and different speeds. So what are y'all's thoughts? This is something that I've always been, I've always wondered, but I think I've just kind of learned over time. What are your thoughts on just kind of how you hike at different speeds or in regards to other people? If somebody's in front of you and they're much slower, you can see that they're struggling. Do you kind of, run past them and, go, or do you just do you take a break and wait for them to go miles ahead above you? Like, just kind of, what are your thoughts? What's the etiquette regarding that around trails?
Be considerate of their outdoor experience.
Yeah,
I would agree with Dave on that of like, be considerate, but kind of try to figure, okay, am I going to be like running past them and pushing them out of the way just to get past them? or is this one of those where if I stay behind them, I'm just kind of like creeping on them, breathing on their neck the whole time? Like, which one is going to kind of give them space from me and give me space from them in the most like courteous? I don't want to, not necessarily, you don't have to be overly polite, but do be courteous, be kind, be considerate of other people. And yeah, if it's, maybe it's one of those you have to wait until there's a good wide spot in the trail where you guys can pass. Maybe it's just too narrow and you got to wait and you got to, be patient. But yeah, I think just think about the situation and be courteous. And don't, damage the environment. Don't go travel on soft surfaces just to get around them.
Don't hike off trail to get around that group.
Yep. I see that a lot, and it's, it's a problem.
yeah, it's a funny little story for you guys. I went on a trail one time. This is when I was not quite acclimated to Colorado yet. And then when, you go up into the mountains, it's even higher in elevation. So it's going to affect you even more. And I went on this trail and started hiking, started going. And there was a couple it was actually a family, a couple with the kid in front. And they were walking slowly. They were taking their time. And I could tell I was catching up to them and I wanted to go around them, but it wasn't going at the pace that I wanted it. So I ended up sprinting past them, and not trying to kind of eavesdrop or hear conversations or be there too long. And I ran past them, and about, maybe 50 yards in front, I realized I was exhausted and I was tired. So I ended up sitting down and taking a break, and they ended up passing me. So
It's a tortoise and the hare situation, right?
I felt very silly in that moment, at that point. So rather if I'd have just kind of passed them calmly and at my own pace. But what is kind of the etiquette when you're in a tight quarter and someone's coming down from a hike and you're going up to the hike? Who kind of is supposed to go? Who generally gets to go first? Is it situational based off of, the rock formation on the trail or how steep the passing point is?
So the person going uphill has the right of way. I have found most times that when I'm in that situation, the person going uphill, we'll kind of look at each other, and I'll move. Like if I'm going downhill, I'll move to get out of the way, and they'll get out of the way and go, no, I want to take a break.
Right.
So, even though the person coming uphill has the right of way, they might not always take it or want it, and it might not always be convenient or safe for, them to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Just situational, kind of a read the situation.
One of the considerations too is I get out a lot on trails that are popular with mountain bikers, and I'm a mountain biker too, but I also like to trail run and I like to walk. One of the things is this expectation that whoever's traveling faster, this other person, like the walker, if it's me in this case, is expected to sort of jump out of the way just in time so that no one has to break their pace, whether it's running or riding. The concern there can be, especially along the foothills in Colorado, for example, the presence of rattlesnakes. So if you're not careful and deliberate when you step out of the way, if you're on the narrower sections, you certainly can step on a critter, or even into the tall grass, and you get exposed to ticks that you wouldn't otherwise. And that's just sort of a thing that doesn't seem to be kind of shared among users. And in that context, Jordan, about who gets out of the way of whom and what have you. So.
Yep.
Yeah, those considerations, safety as well, of course. Yeah.
And I was gonna say horses. Glad you brought up bikes for sure.
Yeah, horses are. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
It's a whole nother beast, pun intended. When you're around horses, right? I mean, you really need to give them like a lot of room. You don't want to spook them. They could buck that rider off, all that type of stuff.
I ain't taking a hoof. Is that what it is?
A hoof. But I really like how Liza articulated there, right? It's each encounter is going to be a little bit different. You just kind of read the situation, you make some eye contact with the people, and it's usually kind of just kind of happens organically when it's people to people. You get bikes and horses in there, and it's always kind of stressful to me.
And that should be noted that you're bringing up bikes and horses. So once again, a general yield rule, and you'll see signs like this all the time, is that horses yield to nobody, people yield to horses, bikes yield to everybody, right? So the horses, and Dave's right, or mules or any pack animal, get out of the way. They are 10 times your size, and they're generally in control. Their rider generally has control, but if something scares them and they lose control, you don't want to be in the way of that. So just give them their room. But if you're also a mountain biker, just know that you are supposed to be yielding to other people, and that might get the situation where somebody's happy to let you go, but just that's something to keep in mind,
Coming back to that plan part, right? Like, know what kind of trail you're on. Is it a multi-use trail? Is it a pedestrian-only trail? Very common in Rocky Mountain National Park. to have horses on trails,
Yeah.
shared use trails out there. It's where I'd run into them all the time. But, well, cool. Cool.
This has been great. These discussions and these talking points. I'm sure we can, you can do an entire podcast just on one principle. But, the thing that I always find interesting about all these principles is they all kind of play into each other. Planning ahead and preparing. Bringing the correct amount of firewood or understanding what kind of wood you can burn in an environment. Camping on durable and flat surfaces and away from places where you might experience some wildlife. Those play into each other, and just being considerate and whatnot with regards to other people and disposing of your waste properly. So I really like how they all kind of play into each other, and they've got some commonalities, they've got some legitimacy towards impacting each other. So I kind of want to close this off and just see what are y'all's main points, your main takeaways from these entire principles. They all play into each other. So what's like your favorite one? What's your most important, I guess, part of one? I'll go first just to kind of give it a little bit of an example. My biggest thing is just preserve everything, or not preserve everything, but like just make sure that you're leaving it the way you found it, so somebody else can experience it in the same way. Try not to just do too much damage. I mean, I know that you're going to be there. You're going to walk and leave a footprint on this path. You're going to, have tire tracks from your car if you're driving out. But, like, preserve it as much and as well as you can.
I'd jump in. My thought is related to litter. And there might be some kind of some difficult cases where people really don't try to manage their litter, and that's not really the person that I'm trying to reach out to when I make this recommendation. But my thought is more, and the thing I've learned from experience, I think my own personal experience, is to secure your trash, secure your litter, your wrapper, rather than just popping it into a pocket or what have you, because it might fall out, and often does. And I think that's especially true, and this is from my experience as a biker, but is that riding and eating while you're riding, and then that wrapper is like, what am I going to do with that? And you try to stash it in between the cables of your, on your handlebars or what have you. So some way to secure that trash so it doesn't just fall out accidentally.
Great. Yeah. Mine, Jordan, I guess would be number one is like just care, right? You can hit all of these principles if you just put a little thought into it and care about them. So that's a huge thing to me. And then I want to add to your statement about like, leaving it in a nice condition. I always grew up under this mantra, which is leave it better than you found it. Right? So you come to a campsite, improved campsite. It's a party spot, whatever, right? Pick up the trash, leave it cleaner than you found it. You're in a backcountry setting and you come to a dispersed campsite, and maybe they spread the ashes, they spread their rock ring, but maybe not super well. You can still tell somebody was there, right? Get those rocks, move them out some more, stuff like that. So leave it better than you found it, so it's even cooler for the next person that experiences it, right?
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. And I was just going to go with, I guess this is kind of more an umbrella idea of kind of where Dave was going with that, of just be aware of the impact that you have on everything around you. Just be aware of the impact you have on the plants, the animals, the other people, like kind of be conscious of that and kind of be part of nature and move in ways, or try to exist out there in ways that don't make a huge impact, because I think a lot of these principles aren't common, or parts of these principles aren't common sense, but a lot of it really just is, a lot of it is common sense, to not go damage nature, don't start wildfires, so just kind of being aware of the fact that you have this impact and you can make a difference in these areas, negative or positive, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
That was go ahead, Brian. I did not know.
But yeah, just wanted to thank everyone. I know I'm going to hand off to Jordan here in a second, but just to thank everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about these things, even if it is virtually. And it's I want to mention that I look forward to getting back together in person and continuing the conversation and bringing in some other folks to contribute and getting back face to face and outdoors to have these kind of conversations this summer, hopefully. So.
Hey, I'm right there with you. I'm looking forward to that day. I appreciate everybody being here, and I mean we could probably talk for days on all this stuff, but there's a lot of information here, and it just takes a little bit of, like everybody kind of mentioned, just take some effort and just take some time to kind of learn it and be considerate. So backpacking is a pretty long and detailed process, so we're going to do some more podcasts on the topic. I believe we're going to discuss some gear and some weather in some future podcasts. So stay tuned with us because we'll be giving you some more content regarding this great topic. So appreciate all you guys being here. This was a great discussion, and we'll be back for some more later on in the month.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.